few words on Lambda versus Kappa. Reason for that being is that within the Klarrio context, pretty much we always worked on massive ingest as well as streaming. Of course, many of the use cases also require batch. Nevertheless, I think our speciality within Klarrio really focuses on the streaming combination of messaging, and there are some differences between the two architectures. So, from a very high level viewpoint, if you would look at the traditional IoT stack today, we would start by default with what we would call a message layer, the traditional block on top resulting into data processing layers, and then of course the necessary visualizations, business intelligence, world of APIs. However, if this were it, you would just be talking about a traditional stack where the domain of IoT comes into is pretty much a discrepancy of what's happening inside of the data processing layer, where you can combine or you can separate these worlds on either a batch environment versus what they call a speed layer. Pretty much this complete picture combined is what is being referred to as a Lambda. Lambda architecture, basically a technology coined or a term coined somewhere 2013 by Nathan Marsh. Of course, became pretty much today what we consider a bit of the standard IoT structure. However, that comes with positives and negatives. This overall batch world, from truly a cloud cost perspective, is an expensive one. Technologies that you would normally encounter inside of these domains are technologies such as a Kafka environment, from a distributed message layer bus, speed environment or speed layer, sometimes also a little bit called streaming, is pretty much the world of MEM, cache or in-memory, sometimes also here confirmed or talked about on in complex event processor. But here you have the world of time series, historians, basically technologies such as Cassandra, MongoDB, and all the different derivatives of non-structured, sometimes also structured use cases. Combined, these two worlds give you the broadest view on use cases from a moment of /last, real time, as well as historical information on particular readings. However, as I said earlier, this whole domain of batch tends to be an expensive environment. You have to imagine that from a message layer point of view, you are really looking at millions of messages per second going in and out, whereby batch often has limitations on how fast these kind of messages can be ingested, especially when looking at domains like Cassandra. So our view, and that is a little bit what we are trying to embed in all of the overall architectures, is to say let's move from this traditional Lambda environment more towards what we would call Kappa, not what we would call Kappa, but definitely also what Martin Kleppmann, with turning the database upside down, really referred to. Try to optimize this overall cost structure on batch. And basically Kappa is pretty much a replica of this Lambda environment minus batch. So when we look at some of the products that we are currently building for customers, which are mainly in the domain of data service hubs, so where pretty much the majority of the incoming data is really coming from either databases or data streams, pretty much a world overall on real time. You maintain this message layer infrastructure, which is pretty much one-on-one with the traditional Kafka implementation that you would encounter in Lambda, but instead of batch, pretty much here you work pretty much with a latest state store and where you focus as much as possible on really streaming or speed, depending on who you are speaking to. It's pretty much the double nomenclature that one is using. And of course, you maintain, in this case, the APIs coming onto later store, or when this is an environment like Flink or Spark streaming or Kafka streams, specific use case API created environments so that the outside world can pretty much dive onto the data received from the field. Very high level, but at least some discrepancy on Lambda versus Kappa, a world where both all of us inside of Klarrio and more the industry and customers are starting to look at.